All right, hi everyone. We're going to get ready here to start in just a second. Before we do, if someone could just type in a quick yes on the chat to let us know if you can hear this, that'd be great. Good, you can hear us. All right, great. Right before we jump in, I want to make a few quick notes of some business for this, and that'll be that as you have, we're going to go through some information with you, and as you have questions that come up, please feel free to post those in the comments in the chat section of the webinar, and then Mark will actually be capturing those and sharing those with us, and we'll be answering those at the end. We'll save time for answering your questions. So as you get those, please write them in to us. And the other piece I want to make sure that you know is that this will be recorded and will be posted on the parents' website for viewing later. So both for those of you who are here today and want to review something or see it again, you'll be able to do that. And for those who couldn't be here today, they can find it as well. All right. So we are here to talk about room selection and what that will look like for current first-year students who are rising second-year students. And my name is Brian Woodruff, and I am the director of the Campus Services Center here at Miami, and that's the office that coordinates housing assignments and contracts and meal plans and ID cards and a few other things on campus as well.
My name is Joe Hawkins. I'm an assistant director in the Office of Residence Life. I oversee Western Campus and Heritage Commons Apartments. I'm also in charge of RA recruitment and selection, as well as our second year initiatives.
All right, so today we are going to spend some time talking about the residency requirement, a reminder about that, talk about returning to first year living learning communities. We want to talk about student-created learning communities, the sorority corridor housing process, the general housing process, also information about becoming an RA. So a lot of good info today, and again, time for lots of questions as well. So the first thing I want to just put out as a reminder here is that at Miami, we do value the residential experience very much. And so for almost the last 10 years or so, we've had a 2-year residency requirement. And so this is that all full-time first-year and second-year students are required to live on campus through the spring semester of their second academic year of enrollment. We do have a few exemptions that are possible for a small number of students. One of those would be fraternity exemptions, and those are coordinated through the Cliff Alexander Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life and Leadership. These are students who are going to be second-year members of fraternities and are approved to be joining that fraternity that also qualifies to house second-year students. So some will do that. We also have other exemptions for students who may qualify. That would include students who are over 21 years of age by the first day of class, those who are residing with their parents or legal guardians at home, and also those who have matriculated full-time for 2 years at another college or university, and that would be after high school. So we're looking at after high school graduation. Because really the goal of this is that we do find the value in the students having the experiences of being on campus, the support related to that as well. So I'd like to share that as a reminder here, and that's part of doing this early is making sure that folks remember this as well.
Excuse me. I also live in the residence halls, and like our students, I'm a little under the weather. So let's talk about some select student second-year organization, or some of our select first-year LLCs will have space for the students who are participating this year to continue and participate in the second year, in their second year of the experience. So they can basically, there'll be an opportunity for some of our students to return to the LLC that they're in if they've had a really positive experience. That generally the expectation of returning members to an LLC include helping plan the kickoff, the first welcome back, let's get the year started event that happens in the first weekend of the semester, and then helping plans the first 8 weeks of programming, helping new first-year students become integrated into the LLC and buy into it and really get connected there. And throughout the year, they're expected to provide leadership to the community. They should be interacting with the first-year students, helping support them, being mentors and leaders in that community, and generally helping with the success of the excuse me, with the success of the LLC. Some of that opportunity to return depends on the size of the building that the LLCs are in. Some of that is demand, and so if your students are interested in pursuing that, if they think they'd like to be one of the students who returns to an LLC in their second year, if they've just had a great experience, they should reach out to their graduate assistant, their resident director, or their area coordinator. They can even talk to their RA to get connected to the right folks to find out if that's an opportunity. And if that's not an opportunity, we'll talk a little bit later about student-created communities where they can create that experience for themselves. Speaking of student-created communities, so this is an opportunity for first-year students, and actually really it's now any student beyond their first year, to create a community around a specific thing that brings students together. So the hope is to then enhance their living experience in the same context as living in one of the LLCs is. They get the additional support from the staff, from the department, from a faculty advisor. There are a lot of possible themes that this can fit under. They could be a common interest or a passion, an extension of a first-year theme or living learning community. Or they could be based around the extensive group of campus. So a couple of examples. A common interest we've had in the past, we've had a group called Dietary Information and Education Team. We're really passionate about educating the campus about dietary restrictions, allergies, etc., and they lived together and did that work together. From there, we've also had groups, International Pen Pals, who just make connections with other college students across the globe. Arts and cinema groups. Extending the first year community, Celebrate the Arts is one that often doesn't have the space to allow returners, but students are passionate about. So we've had multiple years in the last few years. The Celebrate the Arts students create their own second year LLC and then tie that back into their experience in Collins Hall. Social Justice 2.0, again extension, government relations second year, which is now actually grown into being more of a formal LLC, which is great. And then existing groups. So a great example we've had running for the last 3 years is a group called Cheer Us On, and that's been over the course of the years sort of any combination of swimming, diving, and hockey players that all strive to find a space together near the part of campus they spend most of their time, meaning near the rec center in Goggin. Red Hawk Esports we have a NCAA esports team. They put together a group, and then we have Cornerstone, Joy, and Great Outdoors, which are all tied with Crew and Young Life, which are a couple of our Christian-based organizations that have formed their own corridors and come together over the years. So if your students have an interest in this, there's an opportunity actually tonight to go to Leadership Recruitment Fair to find out about that, and then they can also talk to an RA or go to the ORL website and look for student. It's under the campus housing options part of the ORL website. So that timeline, the application will open on December 3rd. There'll be a form that they fill out to sort of start that process rolling under the community options page of ORL. The applications there are due online February 10th, so we try to open it while they're still here. They can ask questions, and there'll be a little bit of window of time when they come back from winter term to say, oh, I do want to do this. Let's organize together and get our application in. Then part of creating this process is that they have to, once they submit their application, they will be invited to do a group presentation, which they'll come and talk about what they want to do, how they're going to approach the work, why they want to be together, how they'll develop community, some questions like that. And they'll present that to a collection of faculty, staff, and students. We'll make decisions and placements based on where they want to be and where we can fit them. We'll send them notifications of where their housing will be assigned for March 1st, and then they'll have to sign their housing contracts right away. So as we send that, they'll get a message and says, hey, you've been assigned to this room, and they need to sign that within a couple of days. And then for the leaders of those groups, so if your student's one of the students who proposes a student-created community, they'll have a training session in usually mid to late April. right before they leave, to get some of the tools they need to start working so they can make the summer useful, so that when they come back in the fall that their community can get up and running like they would if they were a university-sponsored group that was doing work over the summer.
All right, so another one of the processes that's going on, and I guess I should just make clear on this that as we're kind of going through these, there's a variety of these different processes that are options, but students will really just do one of them. So we're kind of going in order of the order that they might occur in the calendar, but these are all really the options that occur, that kind of starting out with some of these more specific options and then moving to the more general. So just to kind of paint that picture for you all. And so the next one that occurs is the sorority corridor housing. And so this is for the current first-year women who are new sorority members and will be living with the other members of their sorority. So these dedicated corridors are located within Hamilton, Minnick, Scott, Richard, and McCracken halls. So just great halls in the center part of campus. They also have suites, spaces where the sororities go within some of those halls and can have group meetings and things like that too. So it's a real nice opportunity. This is an online process that will occur typically right after spring break, is when that would occur. More information about the sorority recruitment in general can be found with the Cliff Alexander Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life. And really, much of the detail about the sorority corridor housing is going to be coming from that office. And then we work together with them on laying out where the corridors are in the halls and who is where. But that process will all be part of anyone who has a student who's going through the sorority recruitment process. And then for those who are part of it and are going to be part of the corridor, they will actually, those members will have the opportunity to go into the housing system and actually choose their own room within their corridor. So the system will kind of block it off for them and just show them the rooms that are part of their sorority corridor, and then they get to choose a room within that space. And again, that would be typically just after spring break. So then the next piece that we have would be the general online room selection. And so this is the process really for all of the current first-year students, again, those rising second-year students who didn't do the returning to their community, didn't do a student created, and weren't part of a sorority. So it's a large number of students, as you could imagine, who are doing this general process. It's the majority. But again, even to say that, we really do encourage, I guess I shouldn't say the majority, because we have probably close to 900 sorority women, and the student created communities continue to grow as well, and so we do encourage those. But this is a good number of students who will be doing this general process. And it's online. It's an easy process. The ability to search for rooms or here it's common apartments, find where you want to live, pull in your roommates, all of those things are options that will be there. And so sort of the general timeline process, we don't have the specific dates defined just yet, but the general process here will be that students log into their online housing account for the process. It typically occurs mid-spring semester, usually at some point in the early part of April is typically when this would occur. So basically the system will automatically generate lottery times for students. They'll be notified of those times, and then that lets them know when it's their time to be able to access the system to choose a room. Another feature of this will be that prior to choosing a room, that your students, if they would like to, will be able to access the system in order to set up roommate groups. So basically the way that the process works is that if you have particular roommates you'd like to live with, whether it's one roommate in a double room, maybe it's you really want to try to get a triple with 3 people, or maybe it's 4. However many that is, maybe it's 2 double rooms beside each other, whatever you're kind of looking for. That your students will be able to get those roommate groups set up ahead of time. So that's something that they can go through. There's tools in the system that help them find roommates, that help them connect and confirm those. That way, when room selection happens, whoever has the earlier lottery time frame goes in, finds the room, and they can actually assign all of the roommates then to that space at that time. So it's a pretty seamless process at that point.
So the last sort of real opportunity for figuring out what your students' fall housing, next year's housing assignments look like is potentially applying to be an RA. So our resident assistants or student leaders who assist the SRS life and fostering growth around our residential pillars of success, and those are safe and healthy communities, build persistence and retention, diverse and inclusive environments, extending the learning environment, and easing the transition to adulthood. And so RAs live on campus, they live in a corridor, they go through an application process that I'll talk about in just a second, and then they're assigned to the community by the Office of Residence Life to a community that we think that they'll be best able to serve and help be both successful in. Both the RA and the community will both sort of benefit one another. We do that in a very elaborate selection process. But the applications actually went live on November 1st, and so the application is open now. Students can go to miamioh.edu/reslife and then look under the banner for a tab called BNRA, and that'll have everything that they need to know about that process, what the requirements are, etc. As I mentioned earlier, tonight there is a recruitment fair in the pavilions of Armstrong that has, and again, if anyone watching this recording, I'm sorry that we've missed that. But for those of you who are here today, they'll have RA information about being an RA, about how to apply to be a student orientation leader, SOLs, student-created communities, and a number of other leadership opportunities across campus. The application to be an RA will be open until January 11th at midnight. Applications need to be complete at that point. That means they'll have to submit they'll enter in 2 people that they would like to serve as references, and then the system will email those folks and say, you've been asked to be referenced for this person, fill out this little bitty form, and they ask for just an endorsement sort of note from them. And then we will, on the weekend of February 8th through the 10th, which is the same as sorority bid weekend, we will be doing group process interviews, and what that means is your student will pick a time. We'll have, I think, 4 2-hour blocks where your student will pick a time where they will have 2 individual interviews and do a group process activity where they get to sort of demonstrate their teamwork abilities. After that, we will go through all the processes and reviewing the candidates and making placements, and then we'll send out selection letters on March 8th. That'll be either you're being offered a position in this place, or we don't have a position for you at this moment. We'd like you to be an alternate, remain in our pool for when openings happen, or no thank you letter. All of 3 of those will go out on March 8th, and then they will need to respond back by March 15th to let us know if they are willing to accept the position that we've offered. I've got a couple notes here that BNRA button. They can, during that recruitment fair, they can just pop in anytime. It's sort of a tabling kind of experience. And then I think that's good. So we've got some questions here. The first one I see is if there's referring back to the student-created communities, is there a minimum number of students needed to form a community? Typically, we say that 8 is the number that we would like for a community. I think it's more than a pair of roommates or 2 rooms next to each other. This is enough people to really pursue something. And then while I'm on that subject, there's also a cap of around 30. We can sometimes push up to 32, but really physically the physical locations. Anytime we try to keep them in a corridor or a house together, and that sort of caps out at about 30 people is where we run out of beds. So your students should be looking to do that between 8 and 30, and there'll be a window of time where they can enhance their roster. They should be working to develop their roster early on as they're planning the stage and have an idea of who's going to be in this community and have those kind of ideas. But then when we we'll say your communities have been approved. Here's the set of beds here's the rooms that you have. Tell us who's where, and then we'll assign them. That's how we worked in the past. I know we've got a new system, so we might be tweaking that as the year goes forward. But that's how it's worked. So they'll have one last opportunity after you're approved to make sure they've got their beds filled and to fill that out.
We have a couple questions about sorority. Good questions here. Just a question about the percent of the women who would live in the if they're in the sorority, that they live in the corridor versus somewhere else. And typically, the idea would be that the second year sorority women would be living in the corridor with their chapter. That's really what's preferred by the Cliff Alexander office, just for the sisterhood and building that community. That's the preference. But there are some cases where some of the women might have various reasons to want or need to live in a different hall or in a different place. So that does happen sometimes, but the vast majority of them will be living there together. And then also, I did want to make clear that the sorority housing process does occur prior to the general process for online room selection. So that's something that those sorority women will already be in their rooms and have their spaces confirmed prior to the general process. So, and that's kind of true for all of these, that if someone did the returning to an LLC, if they did student created, or if they did sorority, they would not need to participate in the general process in any way. They'd already have their room set up, they'd be already confirmed, and so they would be good to go. Unless for some reason they decided that, well, I don't want to do that anymore, and I really would just rather go into the general process and see what I get instead. That's an option too. Some people decide to change their mind, and that's okay. But for the most part, they would not need to do that. Also, a question about a student get to choose specific rooms, and yes, they do, absolutely. So the way it's set up is that when you would go in to choose your room, you'll actually be able to filter by room type, by hall, by area of campus, and it'll show you available spaces to choose from. You'd click, I want to pick this room, and it would go just like that. You kind of work your way through it. So yes, very much pick specific rooms of what is available.
It's not like the LLC process that you went through in the first year, where you said, I'd like to be in one of these 3 rooms. This is literally in our database. They go in and say, I'm in this room. Yes, and they confirm at that moment, and they pick that is their room, and they've assigned themselves in the system to a room that's available.
And then there are some cases where maybe the exact room or the exact hall that you'd wanted wasn't available, and so you picked one that you weren't real crazy about, but you picked it. There will be processes after all the room selection is finished. There will be room change processes that occur, and more details will come out about that. But it'll give some opportunity for students to put out there that, hey, I'd like to find a different room, and how they can work through that. Let's see. So a question about how can current first-year students learn which halls are for second years, and kind of to know what's going to be out there. We don't have a specific list online yet, but there's a lot of halls. So we will have something like this for you all, but I can go ahead and share that we're looking at we'll have a number of halls that are all upper class, and by all upper class I mean basically no incoming students in them. And so some of those might be Heritage Commons, Maple Street Station, Etheridge Hall, Beechwoods and Stonebridge. Hillcrest has a first-year LLC.
Oh, right.
Yes. So then there are other halls that have sort of a mix of some incoming first years and some upper class. So Hillcrest is one of those. Denison, Emerson and Tappan. There's a number of halls that would be mixed. And then there are some that are exclusively first year that for the most part we wouldn't have, with the exception of maybe rare situations, have any upper class students in. And so that might be Morris Hall as an example of that. We really have, for the most part, there will be a lot of halls. We'll have Bishop and Ogden, Wells, will be available. Flower and Han would be available. Miami Inn, Heritage Commons, Presidents, Withrow. Could probably list a whole lot of halls, but there will be a large number of halls open for the rising second-year students to choose from.
With the new system, Brian, is there an opportunity for them to go in and look at the rooms available in advance, or see some of those layouts and do some of that filtering before?
No, those kinds of things will be all during the room selection.
All during the room
selection.
selection.
But we typically do try to get out lists on our website, if at least we can, kind of on the website to say, hey, these are the buildings that you'll be able to, because it is important, I think, to have a sense of, I can be thinking about these halls and ranking.
We don't do a lot of this, but if students are particularly interested in seeing a hall, they can reach out to an RD. Most of the time, students are they know a friend who lives in that hall, and they'll go with their friend to scope out what a room looks like, or go see, just get walked around in the building once. And there are some floor plan type details available on the ResLife website. They'll have all the halls, and they can look at some of those, like what the hall looks like. Generally, most of our halls look about the same. Where the laundry room is a little different, where the vending machines are a little different, but most of our halls are more or less similar to what they've experienced. But yeah.
We have a question here about just a follow-up on the well, and actually one thing I don't want to forget before I go on, thinking just about, again, those halls, there's upper class first year, the ones that are going to be available there. Another step in the process we haven't really talked about, but that will happen, would be meal plans. Something to consider is that for students who live in residence halls, we do have the meal plan requirement. The halls aren't set up for storage and preparation of food, and so we do find that as a very important part of the community as well. So meal plans are required, with one exception, and that is Heritage Commons, the apartments on campus. So those are more the apartment style. They have full kitchens with dishwashers and stoves and such, and so meal plans are actually optional there. So that's something to consider as well as your students would be thinking about what they might want to do, where they might want to live. There's kind of the different experiences you might find in the Heritage Commons is an option for those who might be really looking for more of that off-campus experience while still being on campus with the support there as well. So I wanted to share that piece. Question about the fraternity process. So for the exemptions for the fraternities, so that is something that current first-year men who are participating in the recruitment process for fraternities, part of that process will be information coming from the Cliff Alexander office about what the request process looks like for the exemptions. And so a few different levels of requirements. First of all, the fraternity would have to be approved to house second-year men. Most of them are, some are not. The second piece would be then the individual members have to be approved as well. And so they would be informed of how to submit their request, their application. Those are reviewed by the Cliff Alexander office, and they take into consideration things such as grades and conduct as well in that, and that'll all be communicated through that process. And then typically what happens is we'll get a list of provisional approvals, and those would typically come in the spring. We would know who those are, and then we would mark those students in our system so that we know that at least at this point they're not required to be part of the room selection process because they've been approved for fraternity exemption. We call those provisional because they are still approved pending the final grades at the end of the semester, and unfortunately there are always a number of people who thought they were going to make it, and then by the time the end of the semester comes, the grades didn't meet the level that's required for that. So in those cases, then those men would be notified by us that they are required to be on campus, and then we would work with them to find a room on campus too. So there's that. So a question about, for the general housing process, when a group of people want to live near each other in the same hall, one person with the earliest time slot can confirm rooms for multiple people if the roommate group is set up earlier. The answer is yes. So as long as you have been all confirmed one another as approved roommates with each other within the system, and the system would generate messages to each other, and you log in and can confirm. As long as that's all set up, then any person in that group should be able to actually assign all of the people in the group to rooms either near one another or in the same room in some cases.
So the next question is, which ones are more like apartments, which ones are more like dorms? We've actually been really intentional as we, in the last few years, as we do renovations, we change things, that we with the exception of the Heritage Commons apartment complex, every one of our halls is a traditional corridor-style residence hall where your students are living in a double, triple, single, in a 1 to 4 person room on a corridor with that then a group of 30-ish students will share some kind of common space, study area, set of bathrooms. And so the apartments, 4 people-ish generally, share a common room and a bathroom and a kitchen area. Otherwise, the next closest thing are some of our buildings that have houses, buildings like Beechwoods, Stonebridge, Maple Street Commons, I think, have house style, which is they'll have the building sort of built-in lounge, but there'll be one extra door with an extra sort of smaller common room within a house that they all share. And so that's like sort of like a self-contained corridor with a barrier that sort of tightens up that community a little bit. And then everything else is just a traditional style. And we do that intentionally because that really seems to build the most tight-knit, most intentional community that serves our students the best. And then there are options for quads. I don't know what they are.
We don't have a lot. There are very few, very, very few. We have a limited number of triples, I would say, and then a very limited number of quads. For the most part, most students aren't quite interested in that, I think. So we have primarily doubles, some triples, a good number of singles, and then just a handful of quads. So more often we might see maybe students pick 2 rooms near each other, if that's something. We do have a few quads sprinkled around though. And then of course the Heritage Commons is an option for that if 4 people wanted to be together as well. That would be something to consider. The Heritage Commons apartments that are the 4 bedrooms. Question about the lottery time. So this would be for the general room selection process. That is a randomly assigned time that just gets generated out of the system, and is not based. It's not set based on any kind of credit hours or anything like that. It's just a general, a random time that gets generated for everyone who is a rising second-year student. And then also, glad to see this. It's a good question about meal plans. The question is, can my student change their meal plan for spring? Yes, absolutely. In fact, we'll be sending out an email about meal plans, hopefully within the next week or so. I'll be sending that out just with some reminders about that. That absolutely we do allow students to choose a different meal plan for spring. So if you had one for the fall and you think, this just didn't quite work out, absolutely, you'll be able to pick a different plan for spring semester, and we allow that up until the first day of spring semester. So up until that Monday that the spring semester begins, you'd be able to change your plan up until then. I think we've got a couple more coming here. This is a great one about students with disabilities, and I had actually meant to mention this. The question is, do students with disabilities get preference in the lottery? So actually, we work very closely with the Miller Center for Student Disability Services on campus. In fact, I meet with them about every 2 weeks to talk about various accommodation needs and how we can help students. So anyone who has a disability need for an accommodation would actually work with the Miller Center for Student Disability Services on campus. And they'll work together to help understand what the need is, and then I get involved in my office, and we find the best spot for them, whether it's a private room, it's in a particular hall, it's near an elevator, it's whatever it might be that's needed. We work with them. So really on that, students with disability needs is really actually a completely separate process that we work to specifically assign those students their accommodations.
Can students choose to remain in the Honor and the Scholars LLC? That is one of our highest demand communities, and there's generally not room for students to return back to those spaces. However, that the Honors and the Honors program really does value having the resident assistants in that space in those halls be members of the Honors and Scholars community, and so if you have a student who's really passionate about being a leader within that community, applying to be an RA and preferencing that they're noting that they're part of that community and preferencing, and talking to the Honors program about like, hey, I want to be a leader here, because the Honors program does give us some input in the RA selection process for those communities, and so if that might be if they really want to come back to that, probably the strongest bet to really make the biggest impact would be to apply to be an RA.
All right, there's a question about what is the general cost difference between various halls. So the number one resource I would like to encourage everyone to go and see would be our housing website, and that's miamioh.edu/housing. And within that page, you'll see a link on the left that says housing rates. And so check that out. That's going to list all of the various rates, because as you all know, Miami does have a 4-year tuition promise guarantee, which means that for 4 years, tuition and fees are locked in. And so that does fall in to be true for housing and meal plans as well. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that your student would have the exact same housing price all 4 years, because it does depend upon the type of room they choose. So, for example, if they're in a renovated hall, one of our standard halls versus a traditional hall or an apartment, or a single versus a double, right? There, within those rates, there's some difference just based on the room type. But what that promise does mean is that the listing of prices that your student had their first semester, that listing, kind of that menu of rates, as you could think of it, will stay the same for 8 semesters for them. So if you check out our website, as I mentioned, you'll see it broken out by tuition promise cohort, and so that is listed based on the first semester that your student was here. You'd want to look for that year, that academic year, and then it'll basically show you what are the different rates for the room types for your students. So what's the cost of Heritage Commons for them? What's the cost of one of our standard halls? What's one of our traditional non-renovated halls? What are those costs? And then coordinating with that, also on our website, is a section called Residence Halls. And this is going to show you basically, divided by quad, all of the different residence halls we have. And it actually indicates on that, with each of those halls, what rate types are in that building. So basically, for Maple Street, you would see that within the information about Maple Street, it's going to tell you, oh, the rate types here are standard new, basically. And so then you'd be able to look back and then go to the rates table and see, well, which tuition promise cohort am I in? And that's what the price would be there. So we try to break it out in those 2 ways so that it can be clear kind of what type of rooms and what type of rates you'd be looking for in that building. But then because we have the different tuition promise groups, we actually list the specific prices on a separate page to keep that clear. But I can tell you that when your students would be choosing their room, during room selection as well, their specific price will show up with each room. As they're looking at available rooms, it will tell them this room will cost you this much each semester. So we want to be real clear and transparent about that.
The question is there an upper class community of honors and scholar students? We don't actually have an upper class community. What we found is that many of our upper class students are either going into a very particular kind of space, they're going to join their fraternity or sorority in those groups, or they're picking their housing based on the particular living experience they want to have, more in depth than necessarily they're aligning with their academics. Though that often also seems to mean that they want to live near the buildings they access the most for convenience. Then what we've also found is that students who are really passionate about whatever their scholarship is, has turned to create a student-created community. So like this year we have a number of engineering and computer science groups focused that created their own LLC so that they're in a space with people who are passionate about the same topic more narrowly than they would be in just a general honors space. That has also sometimes included transdisciplinary groups that are, they're intentionally combining architecture and design and entrepreneurship, and some of those kind of things are coming together to create a space where they can do something bigger than what they might be doing in their scholarship personally, which has been really good. So if students are looking for that, or if they're looking for a really particularly narrow, they want to focus on being the upper class extension of the honors program, they should be talking to the honors program to find an advisor and then applying to be a student-created community, and then we'll work to place that community near where the honors and scholars communities are next year. And then where do students find the options of upper class communities? When that comes live, Brian? It'll be published.
Upper class communities? I don't actually have a list of upper class communities.
LLCs? It's for living learning communities. So we don't have any the communities, the LLCs. There are no new second-year communities. So LLCs are primarily a first-year experience that then, if they can, those will sometimes extend into a second-year community, and then, but most often they don't. We're working to expand that as the years go on, as we move forward in the work that our office does. But if they go to miamioh.edu/reslife, there's a community options tab, and that'll spell out. It'll tell you about each of the LLCs and the communities that are there, and whether or not they're generally a first or second year experience. I could maybe give you 2 LLCs off the top of my head that extended the second year. One is the Government Relations Network, has been an intentionally growing group. The Scholar Leaders is an application-based, student-driven leadership LLC that is housed in the 2 oldest residence halls on campus, Stoddard and Elliott. And that's a group of about 75 students that have to go through an application process designed and run by the current year's Scholar Leaders community. They will also be at the recruitment fair tonight, but that is a group that is open. It's an application process. It's highly selective and is partnered with the Wilkes Leadership Institute, the Office of Residence Life, and they do some really great work there.
I think one other thing that I would add, as we're talking about upper class information here, of course, we're primarily talking about your students' second year on campus. As we're looking what's coming most soon, but also just want to put a reminder out there that as your student may be even thinking about what are they going to do their third year, what might that look like? Just to put the reminder out there that we very much do continue to have space on campus available for juniors and seniors who are interested. We have several hundred each year who do choose to do that want to continue that experience, that they appreciate the convenience, the location, just the community, and many number of benefits of being on campus. So there's a lot of options. There's a lot of off-campus options as well. And so just like to put that reminder out there early. I know a lot of times there's pressure to start looking for off-campus housing very, very early. Absolutely want to encourage against that. There's plenty out there, and so encourage your student to take their time on that and not jump too quickly. But also remember that on campus, even beyond their second year, is an option for them.
So at one point when I was talking about the student-created communities, I mentioned, or maybe it was before that, after that, I talked about there's a computer science community. This is one of those student-created communities, and so if you have a student who's interested in maybe learning about what they're doing or how they structured it or how their application process went to try to make their own, that they can reach out to me. Those student-created communities, unless actually this year, because we're expanding student-created communities to be more than just second-year students, they can reapply to recreate those. but it's really student-driven. So the students have to decide that they want to institute and maintain these communities. So the communities that I mentioned, a couple communities like Cornerstone has existed for 8 or 9 years at least, and that is because that group intentionally organizes themselves through their student organizations to re-propose their community and re-recruit students to rebuild their community from year to year. So the computer science groups, there's 2 of them, that exist this year will not exist next year, and we'll start but your student can recreate that, or if your student wants to contact me, I can put them in touch with the leaders of that community about how they created that community and what the shape of that is, so they can have maybe a model to build their own student-created proposal for. And then Brian, if a student wants to change their room selection after they've gone through the lottery, how do they change that?
Can they change it? Yeah, we will have a process for room change requests. So if you weren't able to pick the room you wanted, there'll kind of be a variety of options for how you could make a request to do that, and that'll all be here really over the next few weeks and months. Even we'll be getting more information out on our website, sending out messages and things like that. So we do have a lot of students who don't necessarily get exactly the room they wanted, and so they do submit requests and work through on that. So definitely an option.
Is that it?
All right.
Looks like we've answered all of our questions, all of the questions that you posed. It was a great set of questions. Again, I'm Joe Hawkins. I work in the Office of Residence Life. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we're happy to help. Yes, and again, I'm Brian Woodruff from the Campus Services Center, and I really appreciated everyone taking the time to hear about these important processes and get good information out there. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.